Hello, I'm Kads, and welcome to today's video. So we once again come to the conclusion of another rotation of the Cursed City. You can see we have a day and some change left over, and I made it as far as I possibly could into Soulcross. And honestly, I made it pretty far, about 70%-ish of the waves cleared, so I'm pretty proud of myself. We'll talk about where the struggle points were and whatnot. But we'll start things off as usual from the top, talking about normal mode, which I can fully clear. That is a perk of being in the end game, despite being free to play, and there's the proof there that I can cleared all the stages, including fighting Amius, and we'll show the Amius teams a bit later. And then when it comes to hard mode, as usual, I completed all of the bottom three sections, that being Dead Rise, Call Market, and Plague Home. Amius, of course, as well, and then making it as far as I can into Soulcross. So rotation 11, how did we fare? Let's take a quick gander through each of the stages, starting with stage 1. So this is Spirit Attack. I have a couple of stun sets on the rares, and I do use them in Doom Tower Secret Rooms. The Giant is a little bit of a debuffer, Fanax is primary DPS, and then Ferrican the Fat for the ally attacks, which helps out the stun sets, but also just helps people target whoever needs to be killed. Stage 2 was Force Attack, and you can see here pretty good assortment of champions, primarily being carried by Nishak here. Whenever I can just place the bombs, he can basically one-shot whichever wave that is, so he's definitely carrying the team. But we got to finally use Alika for the first time. So she's one of the champions that I freshly built for the Cursed City of Sintranos, and we finally got to use her. So she bought time on wave 2, locked them all out, and thus we were able to cycle back to the bombs on Nishak for wave 3, because like I said, once he places the bombs, everyone basically falls over and dies. But yeah. Fushan's there, backup stun, and then a Basilisk is there in a stun set as well. Stage 3, basically the same thing with a little bit less champions, a little bit more RNG intensive on this one, just because we're kind of trying to cycle back to Nishak's skills once again. My plan for the long term is to build either Errol and or Aothar, and so they could definitely fit into this team. Maybe we take out Ziichi if we can run both of those, but we'll kind of see, play it by ear. But nonetheless, it was possible just with a little bit of manual play. Stage 4, basically carried by Vlad, is locking them out, a little bit of decreased defense as well, and then Genbo helping do some damage. Iron Twins, pretty straightforward composition, kind of just using the Shadowkin DPS, my overpowered Harima, and then Mishinaki for other DPS, and then Aniri's helping keep everyone alive because she's the only one who's built with resistance. I guess Corvus the Corrupt is also built with resistance, but he's in there just because I wanted to throw him in there, and I think he also extends the duration of debuff, so sometimes he can keep his poisons out there for longer. Stage 6, typically this one can be a sticking point, but in this case we have the dual control of Taragi the Frog with the AoE provoke, as well as the freeze from Cried in the blue, and so that's pretty straightforward to kind of stagger the CC across all the waves. And then we have the sole DPS of Ultimate Gaelic, and then a little bit of backup damage from Crowden and Duck the Pierce, who are built with a little bit of crit rate. Stage 7, kind of similar to the earlier stages, but we have Basilisk once again in the stun set. Broodlord here has a AoE stun, albeit not 100% chance to land. Doom Priest keeps us cleansed, so we can worry less about the freeze from like the Torments and other CC that the enemies might put on us. The Alessia is also in a stun set, but she has a couple of AoEs, decreased defense to help us deal a little bit of damage, and then Wretched Wrath keeps everyone alive throughout the fight. S23, might as well hop over here. Basically, whoever was awakened, just kind of how the stages work. You know, if you have the champions, you can do it. If you don't have the champions, you probably can't. But yeah, Varl and Fanax and Wukong there, triple DPS, and then debuffers between Deacon Armstrong and then Aosta Dreamsong. So just stacking as many high tier blessings as I could. Stage 8, we finally brought out the Frolny here. Freshly built him for a different stage that didn't actually end up working. We'll talk about that a bit later. But just kind of going through each of the stages, I saw that I could use him here on this one, so I ran him just for S's and G's. And yeah, he's unbooked. We'll see that a bit later when we go through the builds for all the new champions. But nonetheless, he was kind of interesting just to kind of see how he fared. But Gizmak was definitely the primary DPS for the squad, but Frolny was a nice secondary backup DPS. We got the poisons from Venomage, and then a little protection from the Ugo and the Brogni to get that one done. Stage 9 is the Sand Devil, and this was pretty slow, full manual run, but essentially Python was surviving the big AoE smack, and then we have some poisons, block buffs, and then HP burn, and so there's potential between those three champions to place enough debuffs to do a lot of damage. And then we're just running Fanax because he's an A1 bot who can just get a decent damage, even though he has negative affinity, so probably not the best choice, but nonetheless it's a choice that kind of worked. Just overall, it still took like 15 minutes or so in full manual. Next up we have stage 10, which is basically carried by Vlad and Varl, a little bit of tertiary DPS from Inquisitor Shamail as well as Sir Nick, and then Neri there to keep everyone protected and alive and revived. And then the highlight of the rotation for me personally, well, one of the highlights, we'll talk about the second one, but the first highlight was finally coming back and clearing S11. Now for this one, I did actually recently build or rebuild Delaja here as an epic and to try and beat the stage, and she just wasn't actually working, but I actually just kind of threw in Yannica, so I thought I needed more support, but it turns out that I needed a little bit more damage to kind of deal with the way I wanted to do this. So we're using the fears a little bit to kind of control the spiderlings, but the main win condition here was actually being able to steal their counterattacks on Mashal. That way all the AoEs from everyone else that attack him makes him AoE back and start doing a lot of free damage to the spiderlings, which won't trigger their counterattacks because he's counterattacking them. So that was kind of a nice secret thing, as well as the Hex from Ruel helped them take a lot more damage and also helped him cycle through his abilities. And plus, once he gets around to his other turn, he can do a lot of damage to targets under Hex. Vogoth bolster set helped protect the team from the initial onslaught of poisons, but also just provided a lot of healing from the AoEs. And then of course Spirit Host is the cleanser for the team, so once all the poisons start off on us, we get rid of them right away, and so we can take a lot less damage. And then Yannica, like I mentioned, is kind of the secondary DPS for the team, but she does a decent amount of single target damage, and you can kind of control if and when she's under a veil, which means you can control if and when she does her AoE, so she can be single target if you need her to be. She could be AoE if you want to deal more damage to the minions. So next up we had stage 16, which was fairly slow, but it's just kind of void affinity. I just happened to have like no real DPS for this rotation, so it was kind of a slow burn here with the petrification and the provokes kind of you being our CC, and then we have our unbooked Supreme Kale doing poisons whenever he could on his ability. So poisons from him, poisons from Mithrala or A1, then basically just kind of poison the waves to death while controlling them with the CC. Stage 25, carried by Narcisse, and we have a trifecta, or I guess a duo of control here with the stuns and the freezes between Armands and Crowd in the blue, so pretty straightforward. And then, you know, Narcisse doing Narcisse things, kind of carrying us through. And then we have hard mode Fire Knight here, stage 17. This is the exact team I ran last time, except that I did rebuild Lanicus the Chosen. She's still currently unbooked, but I do plan to book her in probably the next, I guess CVC starts tomorrow, so probably going to book her tomorrow, just to make this a little bit easier for future iterations, because we know that we're going to see this rotation again in the future. But yeah, I did rebuild her into Relentless, so just kind of try to take advantage of the fact that she also has extra turns in her kit, but having her cycle through her abilities quicker means that we get back to the ally attack even sooner. So Relentless was the build I went for on her. Again, we'll talk about all the champions that we rebuilt a bit later. And then the crown achievement of this rotation was stage 18, and I don't even want to know how many attempts this took over the course of like a week, with like multiple hour sessions per day, just trying and grinding and hoping for the RNG to line up in my favor. And man, have I ever felt that fear is a fake debuff more than running it on this stage. But yeah, we have the true fears from Timothy the Fool, who I did recently book. I booked him last CVC because he's popped up in a lot of Curse City stages, and I'm kind of running out of legendaries to book, as you can kind of tell, just by, you know, booking Curse City champions at this point. But true fears here, stuns from the Husk, and then a little bit of lockout from the Blood Gorge, who's kind of a like side MVP here. He is notably unbooked, but it's kind of nice that you don't have to book to get the full effect of the skill. You just have to deal with the longer cooldown, so that is nice. There's no 75% chance to lock him out that you have to book to 100% chance, so that's kind of nice that I can run him unbooked. And then I did have to rebuild Duodan the Runic into a shield set because wave 2 has double hegemon, which is just so devastating because most of the time you just get locked out and you can't do anything after you struggle bust your way through wave 1. And yeah, so I had to put him in a shield set, otherwise like a couple of these squishier people would literally just die to the hegemons randomly critting or something like that, so I needed a little bit of protection. But yeah, boy, was this stage an absolute pain. Let me know if you guys were able to beat stage 18 in a much simpler fashion, but man, that was a struggle. But yeah, now we'll mention the ones where I kind of got a little bit hung up on. So stage 12, basically a non-starter. I really hate these iterations of stages where it's like just, you know, one affinity and that's like support and HP, and it's just like who's going to deal damage here? I have Kenigashi, Spirit Host, Melga, Gamaran, and like I don't know. I have no clue who you would even use for DPS. So if you guys just sorted out that one, let me know. But that's just like a non-starter when it's just like I'll use a bunch of supports to deal damage. It's like, well, I can't do that. Stage 13, this is something I'm probably going to revisit in the future. This is just a concept I have. I do have Hoffer's the Tusked in there. He's in, I think, a regen set, so he can kind of keep himself alive and revive people as they drop down. We have the Husk in there again for the AoE stun. We have Achak the Wenderin, who might be able to place freeze, but most likely is going to place HP burn, because it kind of depends on the enemy of the stats of the enemies. And then I'm going to try and see about maxing out Soul Drinker, see what he can do, if we can bomb him, and see if that does a decent amount of damage. And then also for more support there, bring in Mausoleum Mage, because he can cleanse anything that the enemy combatants might do, particularly trying to deal with wave 3 here with the double Bad L and the poisons from the Bad L, the poison from Euros when you hit him, and then the fear from Ashal. So I'm trying to build him as like a resistance tank so that he can have enough resistance to deal with all of that, and then just cleanse off anything that happens, if in the case where we don't actually land the stun from Husk, for example. So that'll be something that I'll explore when this particular stage comes back around in this particular iteration. So we'll see about building those champions and see if that's going to end up working. This stage here, S14, I have a full team that could potentially do it, but the problem with this one is that it starts off with 2 Cupid Eye and a Venus, and so you just get counterattacked into oblivion if you don't land the stuns. And I have 1 stun set on Basilisk, and then I have a chance to stun with Husk. But of course, we're negative affinity relative to the Cupid Eye, and so most of the time you just get smacked and smacked and smacked until you all fall over. And of course, it's attack champions and maybe a little bit of HP. So I'm thinking about building Nizana into a stun set, just because she does have the AoE decrease attack here, which could mitigate some of the damage done by the Cupid Eye, but also stun them, and then AoE on the A1 as well, and then added protection if we want to protect the team a little bit. So that's my consideration. I don't have the gear for her just yet. I just fully got a stun set onto my Bowsmith Flannan, who's my latest 6-star champion. He's not going to be used in this rotation, but he's come up in other rotations, so I do plan to use him in the future. But I'll start working on a new stun set for Nizana in the future. And then S20, this one felt like I could do it, especially after the War Chief changes, but now that he heals on the A1, I'm not going to say that he's worse now, just because it was definitely more painful when you just kind of kill yourself to his reflect damage passive. But it is very, very annoying because he's force affinity and he hits really hard and he keeps healing himself. So, and this team is basically the control that I have is provoke. And so it's not that he's stunned or anything. It's just that he just forces you to attack a certain person with the A1, and he's healing himself a bunch. We're weak hitting like crazy. And yeah, I digress. But this is why I ended up building or putting gear on Frony to try and beat stage 20. Wasn't able to do it, but this does seem like something that could be possible in the future. Wave 2 is just a little bit too strong. I need a little bit more control, because essentially if Choragi doesn't land the provoke on everyone, it's basically a wash, and then we don't really get anywhere on wave 2. Because they're just super tanky, and I can't really recover once they start getting turns, but I digress. And then lastly, stage 19, which is kind of a non-starter because everyone knows this is the infamous Taurus and Marichkich stage. And yeah, we have like the basics of a team here, but unfortunately for me, a lot of the champions that I kind of want to use are like poisoners. So like, Dalaja, who again I mentioned, I recently built her for that other stage, just poison on the A1, so we just instantly activate Marichka's passive, and then my Celiac Pre-Storm and AoE poison, so I can't use him either. And so maybe Vergamkar might come in handy a little bit later. He does have a stun on the A1, but there have to be a good amount of like RNG going into it. Maybe I have to put Necromothar on a stun set to make this work. Samson's pretty decent, but he's unbooked at the moment, so he's not really maximizing the damage. He has no masteries either, so it's like maybe this could be viable in some future state, but for now, with a couple hours left, I'm not really going to be worried about it in this rotation. So that is as far as I got this round in Soulcross. Like I said, I'm pretty happy with the result overall, because S18 was an absolute struggle, and then S11, I believe it was, yeah, it was just kind of satisfying, because that time last time I felt really close, but like the second wave of poisons was just so devastating once the nether spider respawns the spiders, and that's where I was wiping constantly last go round. And it was just satisfying that I finally found a unique combination of my champions and their own builds that could work and beat that one. So that was a bit satisfying. When it comes to Amius, let's take a look at both teams for each of the difficulties. So this team is the same one that I ran the last time this iteration came up. I did have to rebuild the Drexlar because I had built him for damage in the Guardian set for a different fight, and I ended up lowering his accuracy a little bit too much, and so I had to rebuild him into something that had enough accuracy for this particular fight. But he is our primary DPS, Brimstone plus the HP burn passive. We have the trifecta of supports here with the double reviver, the cleanser for the stun in form 1, and then the healing from Wither in both forms. And then we have our hero reduction champion, that being Hellborn Sprite, who unfortunately is still for me is a 2-star. We haven't gotten anything higher from the Soul Stones. I'm still hoping to get her to at least 3, 4, maybe even 5-star, just so that she takes a lot less damage when he starts ignoring defense on Form 2. But nonetheless, that's the comp. That's the team that was able to work on hard. And a fun fact, I actually did that one on stream a couple of weeks ago, and there will be another raid stream this weekend coming up this Saturday, 9:30 a.m. Pacific time. Hope to see you there, but it will be live on my Twitch channel, which will be linked in the description box down below if you want to check it out. So yeah, I think this coming weekend is going to be more focused on whatever is going to be going on for the fusion, because I am working on the fusion for Gretel. For the normal mode of Amius, it's a lot more straightforward here. We got the healer reviver with Pythion. We have the protector here, primarily for Form 2, but just kind of backup cleanser in Mithrala. We have our secondary DPS with the Brimstone and Aostrid, but also the Weaken is kind of nice for doing a little bit more damage. He's immune to decreased speed. And then we have double hero reduction champions here, Venomage being the primary, and then Coldheart being the backup whenever she can use it on her A1. So now, as promised, let's talk about the few champions that I freshly built and rebuilt for the purposes of the Cursed City, starting off with the Mythicals, I guess, and that is only for the freshly built category. And you can see here he's in a Savage set, and then a little bit of Happenstance, Supersonic, a little bit of Reaction as well. But yeah, his gear is not maxed out. He's not like super important. This isn't my best gear. You can see there's a good amount of 5-star gear on him, so it's not really an amazing build. As we can see here in the total stats, 81,000 on the HP, 3k on the defense, 200 on the speed, full crit rate, 233 on the crit damage, and then didn't really care about the accuracy or the resist. So it's nothing insane, unfortunately for him. Like my HP-based nuker, my primary HP-based nuker is White King Narcy, so he has my best gear, and I don't really have a like good, super good second set for anyone. And yeah, like I said before, he's unbooked completely on both forms, and so he's just kind of there as an accessory if I need to use him in certain areas, but he's not one of my primary major built champions. And then as a general trend you'll find here, but anyone who's exclusively built just for the purpose of the Cursed City is not going to have any masteries because it's just not necessary. Next up for the freshly built category, we have Bloodgorge, who's in a smattering of gear, a little bit of perception, a little bit of Happenstance, Supersonic, and then divine crit rate, because I'm honestly struggling to build this many nukers on my account. I've literally run out of like attack percentage chests with speed and crit rate, and so sometimes it's just really hard to crit cap them, and in this case divine crit rate definitely helped him get all the way out to 100%. So 36,000 on the HP, super squishy, only 3.8k on the attack, so nothing crazy there, but note that his gear isn't fully maxed out, and it's also once again a decent amount of 5-star gear because, you know, he's not getting the best of the best by any means. Full crit rate, 225 on the crit damage, and then 277 on the accuracy, which is kind of on the edge but decently enough to land debuffs or land his lockout skill on the Cursed City stages. As I mentioned before, he is completely unbooked, and we're just taking advantage primarily of the A2 whenever it's off cooldown. And then once again, Cursed City exclusive champion, so he does not have any masteries. Next up, we have Alika, who I mentioned last time around was going to be featured on this episode because I expected to actually use her in some stages. Last time she was just freshly 6-star, and I didn't really need to use her anywhere, but we have her in a Savage set with Perception. So once again, kind of getting leftovers for Savage. You can see it's basically entirely 5-star gear, so it's not the best of the best. I saved that for my more important champions. But 36,000 on the HP, 4k on the attack, 215 on the speed, full crit rate, 186 on the crit damage, nothing crazy there, and then 350 on the accuracy, which is a little bit overkill, but Perception kind of pushed her above, and just, you know, the stats kind of worked out. Once again, the stats are nothing crazy, but she does the job that she was allotted to do. She is an epic, so I did fully book her last CVC. You can see there she takes a lot of books, but when you're in the Endgame, epic books are kind of a dime a dozen, so it's not that big of a deal. And you guessed it, once again, mastery is not done. I get, you know, crit rate if they're a damage dealer, but that's basically it in terms of masteries. And then lastly, for the freshly built champions, we have Delaja, who was fairly recently maxed out to 6 stars and booked and whatnot, but we have her in a Guardian set with a little bit of resilience and protection. So if we check out her total stats, we can see that she has 78,000 on the HP. I tried to focus on maxing out her HP so that her shield is as big as possible. 3k on the defense, 218 on the speed, don't care about her damage, and then just about 300 on the accuracy, which is usually the target I aim for Cursed City champions. For the skills, you can tell that she's once again an epic. She is booked. For the blessing, I did go with emergency heal so that when her shield that she places gets broken, she gets a little bit extra healing. That's kind of to combat the fact that she's in Guardian gear, so she's taking damage on behalf of other people. But as I mentioned earlier, she ended up not working for the Nether Spider composition, and so now she's just built in case I happen to need her for something else. And then, you know, Cursed City champion once again, no masteries. Now Now for the champions who were rebuilt for the Cursed City, that being champions who were already 6-starred for some other purpose, and I just changed their gear set or changed their gear around just to make them work for whatever stage I was running it on. As I mentioned before, Lennicus is now in a Relentless set to take advantage of the fact that she already gets extra turns in her kit, and extra turns again helps her cycle back through or to her ally attack ability here. And then, like I said, tomorrow, for CVC, I do plan to book her out just because I have an excess right now of Legendary Tomes, and again, her rotation for the hard mode of Fire Knight will come back around at some point, and it'll just be a lot easier to do with this on a 4-turn cooldown, and then also maximizing the chance of this to grant her an extra turn, which can help her again cycle back to the ally attack. Almost forgot her total stats here, my bad, but 59,000 on the HP, 2,200 on the defense, 229 on the speed, full crit rate just to make sure she can heal herself with the A1, but she's not built for damage, as you can see there on the crit damage, and then 320 on the resistance. She doesn't really need accuracy, so I opted to go for a little bit on the resistance side, but again, her stats aren't really maxed out because the banner's not fully leveled. The blessing, intimidating presence, just some filler blessing for now. I didn't really think of anything else that would really help her in any particular area. And then a little bit of mastery is just the crit rate to help her be crit capped, and a little bit of extra resistance. She used to be on my Baumel team, but her spot was literally 1-for-1 replaced with Lady Mikage because she was bringing in the increased attack, and then she'd also brought in the ally attack. And Mikage does that all in one skill, so she lost her job, but she was demoted down to Cursed City only champion. Next up, we have Dudan the Runic, who was already built in a completely different set. I think I had him in Guardian before, but yeah, I rebuilt him into a shield set. The Merciless is just happenstance, and the pinpoint is just kind of a bonus. He doesn't really need accuracy. But total stats here as follows: 59,000 on the HP, which honestly feels really, really low, but I guess it's because his gloves and chest are not maxed out. And I prefer the chest to be HP percentage, but I wanted to force him into the shield set, so I had to make sacrifices there. But 3,300 on the defense, 252 on the speed, so super, super fast. I want him to take as many turns as possible because I'm using him primarily for his A1 to cleanse, and that's how I helped counter the Hegemons on the wave 2 for stage 18. 382 on the resistance, so it's not maxed out because, again, his gear isn't maxed out, but the intent is that he has enough resistance to not get debuffed in any time I have to use him in the Cursed City. As an epic, once again, he is fully booked, and because he provides a shield somewhere in his kit here on the A2, I also went with emergency heal on him so he can heal himself. And of course, for the masteries, Undone because he is a Cursed City exclusive champion. And then last up, we have Spirit Host, who was rebuilt. She basically already had a similar type of gear, but I made sure to force her into Immortal just so she can heal up against that Nether Spider, just because in some of the instances, she would end up being whittled down super, super low with no healing and then be kind of killed off just before the end game of that particular fight. And so the Immortal set helped her heal herself on top of being able to heal herself a little bit with the A1 and some War Master procs. And yeah, her total stats here, that's what we're trying to do, are 59,000 on the HP, 2,500 on the defense, 234 on the speed, and then 466 on the resistance. So really, really high resistance because she is a cleanser and she can't really do her job if she is controlled and or CC'd. So that is why we opted for that. I did force her into Blood Shield because I put emergency heal on her blessing there just to make sure that she can once again try to heal herself. So that plus Immortal was enough to kind of combat a lot of the poison damage because she had to take the poison damage because she's the person who cleanses them. That's why that's that way. And then she's fully booked because she is a rare, of course. And her masteries are done mostly from way, way, way back in the day, like dragon runs and stuff like that. So that is why she has a bunch of masteries. And honestly, I did think that she had War Master. Maybe I redid that at some point and took it off of her. But yeah, we had a fair amount of champions that were built up for this rotation just because we're trying to experiment with a couple of stages that were repeats from previous iterations. And so, yeah, we had some ideas and a couple of them came home and a couple of them did not. So, all right, that's going to do it for the summary of my progression into rotation 11 of the Cursed City. Let me know in the comment section down below how far you guys made it. If you do, try to push as far as you can into the Cursed City. As far as the update on Carnage, you can see here that we are 30 candles away, so most likely it should be possible to get him in the next rotation here. I don't know, kind of depends. I forget exactly how many candles these are. I think it all adds up to 100, right? So maybe if I can get kind of where I'm at, but plus the last awakened stage, which would require me to get through stage 20 and or stage 14, as well as this double boss, and then get all the way out there. But if I can manage to pull that off, there is a decent chance that I can make sure that I can get all the way out to 30 candles, and then I can claim Carnage at some point in the future state. I have no intention to use him. I don't have a lot of mythical tomes at the moment. I booked Gizmak, the terrible last CVC, and that basically used up all the mythical tomes that I had. And so basically back to saving mode. I guess I'll get one here soon. But basically back to saving mode on mythical tomes. So I don't really plan to book any more mythicals in the near term. As always, if you did find this video helpful, then be sure to hit that like button down below. Hopefully I've been able to provide some sort of inspiration for a team that you could build on your account in your way to beat one of the stages that you're stuck on. And lastly, if you did enjoy the video, then be sure to hit that subscribe button down below as well. Thanks for watching and have a good one.